We're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. We're going to do today a little bit differently. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll.
Clegg.
Here.
Bagent.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Thompson. Woodings.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
I am going to ask that we start this meeting with a moment of silence for the victims yesterday, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we start, I want to say a couple things, and council members might want to as well. Yesterday was a really tragic day for our community, this place that we all hold dear and love deeply. I continue to be deeply grateful for and I'm inspired by not only our first responders who showed up, did their job, but added compassion and care into the mix, as they do always, in ensuring that our residents remain safe. And also to our everyday Boiseans that were working at the mall, shopping, doing what they would usually do on a Monday, who stepped up and took care of strangers, who have already begun reaching out with their stories of people that they saw taking care of them and others. And I really appreciate that. This investigation is ongoing. It will remain ongoing. As I said yesterday, we will share as much as we can, as soon as we can, when we can. I want the community to understand that that's very important to us. I recognize and appreciate that many people are feeling what we're all feeling the same thing, and that yesterday was tragic. And we're concerned about the victims, those families who lost loved ones, but the victims that were victims of circumstance that were there as well. And whether they were hurt physically or emotionally, much was gone through yesterday as a community. And we need to center the conversations and our thoughts and support around them. Recognize that there is much to be explored, investigated, and then communicated in the future days within our community, but that we need to protect and respect the privacy and needs of those who were hurt and the families of those who were lost. I want to thank everybody once more for stepping up. Thank Boiseans who have reached out with their care and concern. We heard from the White House last night, from mayors around this country last night. They are thinking of Boiseans, and just know that folks are with us, for us, and waiting for the right time to care for those members of our community who are deeply hurting. And I will close with thanking all that have stepped up, all who did unspeakable and things that they didn't know that they could do yesterday. And thank our first responders for responding and caring for those that needed it when they needed it. And to each of you for stepping up. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I don't have anything to add to the wonderfully perfect and beautiful things the mayor just said, except, to people in the community, it's okay to feel grief and frustration and depression and even a little bit of anger that something like this could happen. Those are normal feelings and they're normal responses, and it's perfectly okay to have a personal emotional reaction to this as we all try to process it. And I want to acknowledge that and remind people that there are many opportunities and places to talk with and share and communicate and join in some of those feelings, because it is part of the normal process. Apart from that, I really wholeheartedly agree with everything the mayor just said.
I also don't have a lot to add. Boise is my hometown. This is not something any of us ever expected to have happen here, even though we knew it was possible, even though in this world, in the way that we are living in this world, it's always possible. And yet, Boiseans stepped up. Our first responders came and did their job in a way that made it much less tragic, much less worse than it might have been. They also then, in the aftermath, treated people with compassion and care. And as the mayor said, everyone who was there yesterday, from the reports I've heard, took care of each other. And I think that's hopefully the lesson we learn, that this community will take care of each other, and we need to. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just on top of what everyone else has said, I want to acknowledge all of the mall employees. As someone who worked in the mall in a fishbowl covered in windows for a decade, I think of all those employees who took care of their customers and did their best to keep everyone safe. So you're seen. Thank you for doing your very best. And I'm sorry that this was a situation that was presented to us. Just take care of each other. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, thank you. My heart goes out to everyone who had to have this experience at the mall, because quite frankly, they didn't have to have that experience. I hope that this is the last time that Boiseans have to have this shared traumatic experience at a place like the mall. People go to the mall, buy makeup and lotions. It's not a place where you think you have to prepare yourself to duck gunfire. And I think the best way to honor those who've been injured, those who are no longer with us, is to do better moving forward, that we not waste this experience. I am a woman of deep faith. I believe in prayer, but it needs to be followed up by action. And if people in our community are so moved, I hope that they will. I hope they will look for ways that we can prevent something like this from happening in the future. And again, I hold very dear to my heart everyone who was affected by this yesterday.
Well, thank you all. We will, as I said, we will continue to have updates for the community, and there will be opportunities to come together when the moment is right in the coming weeks. With that, we are going to start working on our regularly scheduled agenda today. But first, something that's not on the agenda, but as you can see, Rebecca Hupp, the director of our airport, is here. I wanted to acknowledge Rebecca and allow us as a city just a moment to acknowledge Rebecca, as she's been named the Medium Hub Airport Director of the Year. And this is it's a big deal, is what I've heard from people in the airport world. Rebecca's very humble about this, so she didn't tell me it was a big deal. But we are a new medium hub airport, and it is truly because of the work and the focus, dedication, and perseverance of our director, Rebecca Hupp, and her team. And we have seen this airport in the years since Rebecca joined the city grow. She recognizes the value of the airport in terms of our economic opportunity, economic development work that we're doing to build a strong economy for our residents, has worked hard to center the airport in our climate initiatives, because she recognizes that airports of the future are important for a thriving valley, and also how impactful operations there can be in our long-term desire to electrify and realize savings for our residents as we prepare for a climate-constrained world. She's a leader of a great team. Our airport was rightly recognized now as a medium hub And I think it's incredibly well-deserved that Rebecca has been honored with this title as Medium Hub Airport Director of the Year. And with that, I just want to say thank you and congratulations.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
You know, I have the pleasure of serving as one of the liaisons to the Airport Commission, and watching Rebecca's work and all of the airport employees' work during the pandemic at a time when airports just really did not know what was going to happen and how to respond. And they dug in and responded in a way that allowed us to not be hurt as much by what happened with COVID as most places, and to be poised and ready to jump back into full operations more quickly than a lot of places. So I would agree with the decision of whoever the jury was that Rebecca is well deserving of this honor. And thank you for all that you do for our airport and for our city, Rebecca.
Madam Mayor. I think one of the things I've learned most as a newer city council member is actually what the airport does and the capabilities of what our airport can do. I think one of the first things that you do is you get a tour of all these different places in Boise, all of our different departments, and you go to the airport and you say, like, this is a complex place. But then you take the tour and you're like, holy crap, there is a lot going on here, like more so than anybody ever could possibly imagine. And then you start to hear about the future plans of like what we're going to do and why we're doing it. And it's pretty unbelievable. And I think that a lot of people take it for granted how special the Boise airport really is. For me personally, like during COVID, one of the bright spots was the Boise airport, because you were kind of looking for these different points of light at the end of the tunnel of recovery. And it seemed like every other week there was like a new announcement of a new nonstop flight. We had to a new location, and that people were interested in being connected to Boise. And as that was happening, you also got to start to see like how this is going to bring business here, how this is going to let us take our Boise values and our skill sets to other areas as well. And I was just amazed how much of a bigger picture I got of what the airport does, and the leadership that you hold there. So I just want to say congratulations. I want to say thank you for providing some bright spots and some motivation of what Boise will look like when it will recover. And I also want to say thank you to all of your team who I know worked so hard over there with you. So thank you and congratulations.
Madam Mayor, I want to also extend my congratulations to Rebecca. The airport is one of my very favorite places because it usually means that either I'm feeling very productive or I'm going on vacation. And in either instance, I'm at my absolute happiest. And I also want to recognize the additional complexity that comes with being a medium hub airport. I know that there are extra requirements now, that as we look at adding our second terminal, that might look a little bit different than some of our original plans, unless Rebecca has expertly planned for all of those things in advance, which she probably has. So I just want to recognize that with that acknowledgement comes extra duty. And I know that Rebecca is up for the task. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for bringing great honor to our city and for doing such a great job with our airport.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Congratulations, Rebecca, on this well-deserved recognition. As Councilmember Halliburton mentioned, you know, once you take that tour and you fully take in the complexities involved in your job, it really is quite impressive. One thing I would like to thank you in particular for is the way when you present before council and during our work sessions, that you do it in a way that people can understand. You make these complex systems very accessible, and it's something that I appreciate as somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs, but you make it accessible to those of us who are regular people. And I think anytime we at the city are able to speak about our complex systems in a way that our citizens can understand, I think that's something that they really appreciate. And so thank you so much for that. And again, congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for such kind words today. I just want to thank all of you for your leadership, because we could not do the things at the airport that we do without having a strong mayor and council supporting us. And so I'm really grateful for your vision, because while I've been here almost a decade, this is a journey. It's not a destination. And I think it's the foundation that was laid years ago, and we'll continue to execute on that. And as I think about this award, I'm truly humbled to have received it, because I know that it's not something that I've done personally. I'm part of it, but it's much bigger than just me. It's all of you, and it's definitely our entire team at the airport. And when you think about the complexity of the airport and the 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation, it takes a team. It takes an entire organization, and it's not just something that one person does. So thank you. And I appreciate the kind words.
Good to see you, Rebecca. Thank you. All right, now we're going to move into a presentation by Sean Keithley on the results of our economic strategic plan. And just to tee this up, it was June of 2020 that our Economic Recovery Task Force suggested a suite of actions that we could take as a city to support economic development and economic opportunity in our city and region. One of those things that we knew was important to do was to undertake a strategic planning process to hear from hundreds of stakeholders in this community to develop the best and most effective ways that our staff could support long-term economic opportunity in Boise and beyond. And Sean is here today to share with us the takeaways from that report and to answer any questions you might have. We are tighter on time than we intended, so I'll just ask folks to be as brief as possible and know that there's more opportunities to discuss if needed. But with that, Sean, please go ahead. You've got some important information to share.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As always, it's an honor, and it's with gratitude and humility that I am here today to present to you, as the mayor mentioned, the outcomes at a high level of our economic development strategic planning effort, which has been something we've been undertaking as staff with many hands from the community over the past 9 months, and are very close to wrapping up the effort today. I am to share the screen. Okay, so as the mayor mentioned, the plan has been something that's been a long time coming, and the conversation around the development of a strategic plan, most recently anyway, began with a conversation I recall at the beginning of Mayor McLean's term to talk about some of the priorities of her office during the course of her administration. And one of the first things we talked about was the development of something that would guide intentionally economic development and the work of this office over the course of not only the next 4 years, but something that could live on as a living, breathing document that could be updated over time. And that's what we set out to create. So the project purpose that I've set before you here is something that just came directly from our scope, but I think it essentially sums up what we set out to do, and I think what we have come pretty close to achieving today. And that's to develop a plan that will define the city's economic priorities, including the goals, strategies, and actions, and as well as indicators of success, the metrics that will help us measure how we do on this plan and the progress we make in the context of our current economic environment, and of course, an eye toward the long term, the changing economic environment and the evolving city that we have. So as far as this meant in terms of implementation and how it came together as an actual project, first of all, it was grounded fundamentally in the mayor's priority of building a city for everyone, as well as the 6 constituent priorities that make up that overarching goal. As the mayor mentioned, it builds upon the work of our Economic Recovery Task Force and that effort in 2020 that provided us a roadmap for navigating the challenges of the pandemic, but also helped to put into more concrete terms some of those priorities that we knew would be longer term fundamental economic development priorities. It's designed to provide direction to staff as well as leadership. So in terms of staff and our ability to report to leadership our progress over a 3 to 5 year timeframe. But again, it's something that we aim to have as a living document that will be updated over the longer term. And finally, what really makes this distinct and unique is that it defines economic development holistically. We have officially 2 or 3 people in our office, in the mayor's office, that guide economic development. But really, we have an entire city organization and a broader extended arm of our trusted partners and stakeholders on the outside that are working with us to implement economic opportunity for everyone, a city for everyone, and all the things that go into that. The things that go into that, of course, include economic development, broadly speaking, housing, transportation, climate, community engagement, water renewal, and a host of other priorities. Those are just a few. But just want to make the point that this is something that, although we think of economic development in terms of our day-to-day processes and operations, it really touches so many things in the city that go outside of our direct responsibility. And that's why this document is here to help guide the work across the city, internally, as well as our external stakeholders. So as mentioned, it doesn't really change our core focus on what we do in economic development in those operational areas. Those are traditionally for us anyway are business attraction, business retention and expansion, a support for entrepreneurship and promotion of small business, development of relationships and key partnerships that enable us to do the work that we do, and what I'll just call creative solutions that enable us to be agile from an economic development standpoint and to be a resource for city leadership when it comes to complex issues that we need to act upon quickly. What it does do is to create an emphasis on broad strategic thinking, and it brings together those multiple priorities and spreads out responsibility and accountability and shared ownership across a wide breadth of stakeholders. In terms of the project itself, it was approximately a 9-month timeline that kicked off around February of this year. And the project leadership, of course, included our economic development staff in the mayor's office, as well as our consultant team, Community Attributes Incorporated. We also had an internal advisory committee that helped to guide this work and ensure that we kept the work of the project within the bounds of the city's priorities, within the council's priorities, and that we were going to be aligned with the broader departmental priorities in the city. The internal advisory committee was comprised of council leadership, Council President Ling Clay, Council President Pro Tem Sanchez, Mayor's office staff, and community engagement staff. We also received a thorough review and guidance from City of Boise departments. The plan was reviewed iteratively by staff from multiple departments to confirm alignment and consistency across their complex plans and priorities. And most importantly, and I can't highlight this enough, the ownership of this plan lies largely with the stakeholders and the community that played such an important and vital role in shaping it. And these stakeholders were comprised of community leaders broadly represented across the city. More than 100 of these community leaders across 13 different focus groups that ended up being the mechanism for which they provided input into the plan. I'll talk a little bit about that. The feedback from these folks, and I've actually provided a copy of the full stakeholder list for your reference that we'll be including with a copy of the strategic plan that I know that City Council staff has provided to you on your desks. And wanted to just emphasize how far-reaching and broad this ownership of the plan was. The groups included everything from small business and entrepreneurship organizations, folks involved in education and workforce development, mobility, climate, health, safety, and vulnerable populations, all the way through. We had some of our largest employers represented, along with some of our smallest, and of course, involved the important stakeholders in parts of our economy like the airport. We had a number of businesses from the airport area represented, businesses from our manufacturing base. We had community organizations across the board, including the Hispanic Chamber, Women's Business Center. So I could go on, but suffice to say that we did our best to make this a plan that would be truly broadly informed by the community. And I don't think we could have, I think we gave it our best effort to make sure that it was as inclusive as possible. And we're very proud of that and very thankful, of course, for the input from our stakeholders. Some of the key components of the plan itself, and these are really the stages of the plan and how we built it. But we started with an economic landscape assessment that was led with the help from our consulting team, and that included the overall broad landscape of the Boise economy, key trends, data points, and things that would inform strategic priorities along the line and complement our stakeholder engagement efforts. That stakeholder engagement piece, of course, probably the largest portion of the project in terms of our time and budget. Again, that intentional effort to gather input from a broadly representative group of stakeholders as possible. And that was really more the qualitative information. I'll add as well that we had a business survey that reached over 60, that got responses from over 60 business leaders. It was a detailed business survey. Another item that I will say I'm grateful for the participation from the community on. It took some folks a fair amount of time to complete it. And the information we got was invaluable to informing the plan itself. So with all that, we put together the information to come up with a set of strategies and actions that would actually be what the plan is directing staff to do to execute on the priorities that the community informed us of. And then finally, the implementation and tracking plan, which we are finalizing now with our consultant, but ultimately this will be a set of dashboards of key metrics to allow us to track progress toward our goals, and ultimately, most importantly, to report those out to leadership so that all of you can understand where we're going in terms of our plan's priorities and how we're tracking on those. A little bit of detail on the landscape assessment. I'll just go through a few of the key takeaways, some of the facts that were highlighted. Pleased to say that Boise has a generally balanced economy, something that will aid us in economic resilience over time. In terms of how it's evolved over the past 20 years, we've seen a general trend of an employment focus away from manufacturing as the focus of the economy and more towards services, although manufacturing does play an important role and will continue to. We see high education attainment compared to the United States overall, with a special level of achievement significantly greater in the area of bachelor degree attainment. Wages overall about equal to the US average, but it's important to note that housing prices have risen faster than wages over recent years, and is one of the reasons why housing is such an important piece of economic development in this plan and how we address that. And unemployment consistently lower than US averages overall, but it is much higher for people of color. Some key opportunities that were highlighted in this landscape assessment of Boise economy. The Western US represents a growing opportunity for trade and business-to-business relationships, as we've been seeing in recent years. The strong and growing town that we have is an asset that is consistently highlighted by our own employers, as well as those that we're looking to attract to the city, as a place that is critical for continued investment and to help grow over time. Local higher education resources, of course, including career and technical education, are valuable assets when it comes to workforce development and innovation. Of course, those are partnerships that will help us execute on those goals. And then finally, again, in investment in housing affordability and overall supply of housing is critical to meeting economic development goals for our city. The second phase of the project, stakeholder engagement, I've talked a little bit about this already, so I won't go into it too far here, but just highlight again the fact that those focus groups in the business survey and the responses from the survey from that range of businesses and organizations, small, mid-size, and large, helped inform the strategic themes of our plan. And those strategic themes, there's a long list here. They were eventually consolidated and boiled down into the specific focus areas that then became the fundamental foundation for strategies and action development. And I'll just highlight a couple here that we heard in our conversations from some of our stakeholders. I think it's important to note that diversity, equity, inclusion was right up there with some of the primary concerns of or the challenges highlighted by employers when it comes to building a strong economy. And one of the things that they highlighted as worthy of our effort as a city to continue to ensure that as part of our communication as a city for everyone, that we're being a welcoming and inclusive community, and something that will help us grow and attract talent and help these companies be successful over time. That ties right into another key priority for employers large and small here, and that's attraction of workforce and talent. And part of that is it's workforce and talent is a complex issue. It involves a lot of things. Important pieces of those include things like childcare, education, access to mobility, access to jobs. These are all part of the things that make up the things that will attract a workforce to our economy and retain them. Housing, of course, affordability and overall supply. Two others that consistently made that we consistently heard from our stakeholders about were climate and entrepreneurship around climate, as well as creative arts. Two other fundamental parts of our economy that eventually became part of our focus areas and priorities. So I'll talk a little bit about those now. Just as a header for our strategy and action development, again, this is where those strategic priorities turned into the focus areas. 4 of them: regional leadership, strategic economic growth, workforce development and talent, and quality of life. And each of these focus areas include strategies and specific actions to meet the development of the plan. So I'll go into each of these briefly. Okay, regional leadership. So in terms of what regional leadership means, it's a focus on some of those broad priorities that will ensure that our city is successful from an economic development point of view over the next certainly over the next 5 years, but certainly over the longer term as well. And we're talking about big priorities such as housing, transportation, and focus on infrastructure investment. And this is showing leadership both on a regional level as well as working with our regional partners to execute on some of these priorities. It's about promoting local policies and devoting capacity at the city level, as well as ensuring that we work with our partners and leverage their resources to meet the demand for housing, and ensuring that we keep pace with regional growth when it comes to infrastructure. And it provides a roadmap also with partners, critical partners like ACHD, Valley Regional Transit, and our partners of the Capital City Development Corporation to meet these goals as well. Quality of life, fundamental to economic development. We heard from many of our stakeholders about what this meant. It means a lot of things, but one of them is, in terms of actions that we'll take as part of this plan, is consistently communicating what it means to have quality of life for everyone in Boise, and ensuring that our communications across the board reflect this. It's everything from our identity as a city to everyone to our specific assets like 8th Street. I think Doug Holloway is in the room to talk about parks later, but I'll just highlight that things like the work that the Downtown Maintenance Matters team does is absolutely critical to ensuring that our downtown is an attractive place. And we've heard this consistently from employers large and small across the board. And also making sure that these areas, these assets that we have are accessible and enjoyable for everyone. We've also heard that this is something that we can as far as making it a priority for communication, something that we can use to work with our partners, such as the Capital City Development Corporation and the Conventions Visitors Bureau to make a part of their priorities as well. We've already started those conversations and have seen keen interest in helping us to communicate and carry this message forward. Strategic economic growth. This is really the heart of where the focus of the economic development plan comes to life. And it's a focus on some of the things that we already do: nurturing entrepreneurship, supporting existing businesses, attracting new businesses, but being strategic and intentional about it, and knowing where we focus our efforts and where we best use our resources to ensure we're making the best use of our time and our staff and our partnerships as we approach these. We've defined specific sectors with the help of our consultant team that identify the direction to take as far as where our focus goes. Some of those include clean energy and the green economy, technology and advanced manufacturing, the creative economy and the arts, local food and agriculture, tourism and hospitality, and healthcare. These are all parts of our economy. They're absolutely critical now and important that we move forward with supporting when it comes to the various ways that we do that through entrepreneurship, retention, expansion, and business attraction. And finally, workforce development and talent. And this is again where we lean on our partners heavily to ensure that we can execute on these areas in higher ed, technical ed, and partner organizations like the Chamber and BVEP. This is that holistic view of workforce development that includes addressing things like childcare and mobility. And it's also a focus on inclusion and expanding workforce participation and providing support to fill workforce gaps where they exist. And finally, it's the metrics and implementation piece that we are finalizing with our consultant. And this is a critical piece that we're working hard to get right. And ultimately, we see this as a way to develop a number of different measures of our progress. A few examples of these are a scorecard that can, again, intentionally document how we focus on our efforts on business attraction, retention, and expansion. How we can intentionally track engagement with our stakeholders. We've already started moving on this with a CRM tool within the mayor's office to ensure that we can document and report on our progress. And then finally, an implementation of an online data dashboard, which our consultant is helping us to prepare so that we have ready access to data points and reporting tools that will make it easier for us to report to leadership on our progress. Next steps, some of the key actions involve finalizing the report, of course, including that metrics and tracking piece, clearly identifying the strategic leads for each of the priorities and actions that are identified in the plan, identifying the timeframes for those actions so that we can accurately measure how we progress, and then finally rolling out the strategic plan to our internal and external stakeholders and really telling our story. And that's something that we're excited about and looking forward to getting to here in the next couple of months, and making sure that this plan is visible, transparent, and something that translates into action quickly. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor. Well, first, Sean, thanks for the presentation. I know how much work goes into a strategic plan. I've been involved in quite a few of them recently. And I also know how important they are. So thank you for the work, and thank you for the massive amount of community engagement that you did. I was really excited to see that promoting Boise as a welcoming community be included on there, because I had heard from so many people the role that Boise has to play in making sure that people are wanting to come here. And I'm really excited to see that on there. I do have a question about workforce development, and kind of wondering if we've already been able to see any specific gaps that need to be addressed. I know it's kind of a tough time during the pandemic because there's gaps all over the place. But if during this process, if there was anything identified as far as long-term gaps that need to be addressed, or if we're at that stage yet.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, Certainly, we've had some initial conversations with our workforce development partners and have been able to see progress on a couple of items that we initially identified as priorities for economic development. One of them was a development of an apprenticeship program that the College of Western Idaho has been working on moving forward. I know they have staffed that position now, and it's something that we're excited to see where we can partner. It's an item that's given more horsepower to the ability to connect students in the region who are interested in entering the workforce on the career technical side with a program that can adequately identify opportunities for them to grow their skills and ultimately gain employment. And in the plan, we've set forth some of the ways that we can work more intentionally with organizations like CWI and Boise State, and the Venture College, just to name a couple, on initiatives that our workforce development partners have worked hard to identify, where those gaps are, and then where we can plug into that in terms of aligning with the employers that we engage with in the city.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Sean. I've been very, very excited to hear about the strategic plan for a long time. It's great to see it presented. Very nice work. It seems really comprehensive. One thing that really struck me was some of the racial inequities we're seeing in unemployment and poverty. I'm wondering if anything came up in the group's discussions about how we can do a deep dive on that to see if we can figure out the causes of that inequity so that we're able to more effectively address kind of the root cause of that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, certainly this is something that was highlighted and again by some of our most significant employers in the region as a priority to address in terms of broadly addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, and workforce gaps. And the plan outlines a few actions that we've identified as first steps to more intentionally work with our partners like our educational institutions and organizations like the Chamber to more intentionally reach out to folks in the community that may be underrepresented in some of those programs that exist now. Both workforce development programs, our mentoring and networking programs in nonprofit organizations and organizations like the Chamber. So it sets forth a course for staff to work with our partners there to ramp up our certainly communicate our desire to see additional engagement on that level, and hopefully ramp up their efforts as well. So yes, in the plan, we've certainly spelled those out and heard loud and clear that this is something that we need to spend our time and resources on improving.
Madam Mayor, that's amazing to hear. I would also encourage, I know that you mentioned nonprofits briefly. I know that Janice has some really great mentorship programs for folks from various backgrounds who are starting businesses and things like that. So I would encourage really utilizing our community partners like Janice and maybe even like Boise State and figuring out what is causing that. Because I think that we can kind of apply some of our remedies that have worked throughout the years. But I think that when we're dealing with diverse populations, some of those remedies might not be as effective. So I just think that's something to really look at. Thank you. I appreciate all your work.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Sean. I really did enjoy the process. I thought that the consulting folks were very thorough and very open to hearing our input. I would like to hear a little bit more about what we heard from the stakeholders. I think some people might be surprised to hear that folks value diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think some people view it as fluff, as something that's not very significant, and that the only people who talk about it are people of color. We live in Boise, Idaho. I would say most of those businesses are not owned by people of color. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Sanchez, I think I think it's best illustrated by some of the conversations we had, again, with our largest employers, fundamental to the economy of not only our city, but also our state, who expressed right up there with our priorities around housing and transportation, the priority of being able to recruit and retain a workforce to their companies that will represent, that will adequately represent to them a workforce that is important in terms of diversity, in terms of their goals around that, and really just in terms of their goals around building a workforce that will come and be retained here in Boise and Idaho. It can't be overstated how critical some of our largest employers wanted to underscore that point. And so I think it's certainly, yeah, with our largest employers, no question, it's a major priority. It's also a priority across the board with our folks who come here to start businesses, who are entrepreneurs in our community, who are looking to build their future and their families here. Entrepreneurship and the ability to build a business and a life here is something we pride ourselves on in Boise. We've been nationally ranked recently in our ability to attract entrepreneurs, but in order to continue to do that and retain folks who want to feel welcomed and included here in our economy, we need to continue to make it a priority to communicate our message of being a city for everyone, and that we truly value opportunity for everyone. So I'm heartened by the fact that was something that was underscored by our stakeholders, and look forward to supporting those goals with our staff here and any resources we can bring to bear.
Thank you, Sean. Just a quick follow-up, Madam Mayor. I think it's what I value about your presentation today is that you are speaking to the fact it's not just about attracting those folks. It's when you do attract them and then they make that commitment to live and work in our city, and then they find that they cannot because the culture does not accept them. And it's not a healthy environment for folks. I think that's what a lot of folks of color experience. We want to be a part of every level of society, but it can be an unhealthy environment if the environment truly does not want us there. So I greatly appreciate you communicating that in this report.
Madam Mayor.
Sure.
It looks like we're running out of time. Sean, something I'd appreciate just following up and hearing early in your presentation, you'd explained that the Boise economy is balanced, and then the next bullet explained the transition from manufacturing to service sector type work. And I just wonder if that's just a helpful fact to know, or if you view that as a strategic risk and something that we need to address. And in particular, I guess I'd be interested in knowing specifically, like, what do we view our medium-term economic strategic risks to be? That would be helpful to know. Thank you so much for a great presentation, and obviously a lot of work on a hard strategic plan. So thank you.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajan, thank you for that question. So just a point of clarity on that, services there are broadly defined as services that include, professional and technical services, high paying, what you would call service-oriented jobs, office jobs, generally speaking. And in the manufacturing sector, shift, I think, was largely represented just in terms of pure numbers by, if you're looking at the past 20 years, the pivot by Micron, for example, from a production facility, a facility focused on production, to more of an R&D facility that had a smaller production element to it. So as it's represented in the numbers, a lot of those manufacturing jobs that disappeared during that time were due to that pivot. Certainly not to say that manufacturing, again, is not absolutely fundamental to our economy here. It represents, in terms of our wages, the highest wages of any sector in our economy, largely to do with the fact that we still enjoy a significant presence from major manufacturing entities, Micron, of course, being one of them. So it's something that, again, remains fundamental to our economy. We have an opportunity with the area of the city that we have positioned for that, in Southeast Boise, the manufacturing corridor around the Eisenman area and Federal Way. We still have a large amount of land to devote toward that in terms of land that's been zoned and contemplated for that as far as future land uses. So I don't think that that particular statistic represents a risk in further loss of a manufacturing sector. I mean, we've seen an increase in manufacturing in just the last couple of years with that Eisenman corridor area especially, and we're seeing a significant amount happening on the southwest side of the airport as well, including the addition of a fair amount of our airport land lease property. So that's an area where I think we can see a real opportunity for growth in the coming years. And as the work highlighted in terms of our workforce development piece of that, focusing on high-tech manufacturing, advanced manufacturing is a piece we will continue to look to support and ensure that our workforce partners are also supported by our efforts in that regard to drive that forward.
Great, thank you. I think that was a great question, and I'm glad that we were able to flesh that out a little bit more. With that, Sean, I'm sure that there's additional follow-up you'd like to share. Council might have it and they'll direct it through Amanda, but I appreciate you being here today. And just want to reiterate that, this has the recommendations of, a task force, if you will, to support us in making sure that all the pieces of this get completed so that we can really put our best foot forward with the limited resources we have as a city, to partner with businesses, other stakeholders, educational institutions, as you mentioned, to continue to grow economic opportunity here. So really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
So next up, we've got Doug with us today as a follow-up to the conversation we had. Goodness, it was about a month ago. And the purpose of this is, as we've all stated, our goal is to protect our parks. There's been concern that the protections aren't in place to ensure that, for generations to come, they will be protected. And that's our intent. And when Doug was with us last time, he went through the status of different open lands within our city that are set aside for parks and a likely calendar of when we could develop them. And then we asked him to come back with some recommendations on how we could take steps to ensure that these parcels are protected in perpetuity. And appreciate the work, look forward to the suggestions, and take it away, Doug.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Obviously wish it was a better day to be presenting something park related, which is always a good thing happening in our community, but we will power through today. And again, thank you for teeing that up for me, Madam Mayor. So the mayor reached out and asked us after the last presentation and some of the council members as well to take a look at, as we move into the future, how do we better position ourselves to protect the assets that we have in our park and recreation system, and specifically all of the parks that we have and the open space that we have, and what options are available to be able to for this body to be able to implement in order to create those protections. And so we just banged out a very simple goal for the mayor and council to look at. And really, essentially, it's to protect park and open space property owned by the city of Boise and to prevent anything other than their intended use. And you'll probably hear from me a number of times today to use the words protection and certainly intended use, because that really is what the focus of today's conversation with the mayor and council will center around. So our team has spent about the last 5 weeks going through all of the individual files that we have for each of our assets. And so we reviewed quite a bit in-depthly 103 different park sites, which included developed and undeveloped park sites, as well as our 14 open space reserves. And I'll comment a little bit more on what we discovered with the open space reserves. To tee that up just a little bit, our reserves are made up of multiple parcels in each of those reserves. And so we're still analyzing each of those individual parcels. But what we do have for you today is to let you know that all 14 open space reserves do not have any prohibition that would prevent this body from providing the protection over them, nor would any of the 103 park sites. So in other words, we found nothing in our files that would prohibit you to provide additional protections for these parks and open spaces as we would move into future generations.
And I'll
So-
just jump in there too, just so council knows, yesterday I signed the papers on the most recent open space acquisition, and we included language in there to protect it moving forward. Asked that question before signing. It was reflective of the information that brought us. And so we're already implementing some of these steps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That is correct. The Pursley property, as we refer to it, our Horizon Hills, actually closed yesterday. So congratulations, Mayor and City Council, on being the owners of some new foothills property. And as the mayor pointed out, there is language in there that says that property will always be utilized for its intended use as open space. So some of the findings that our team discovered in that 5-week process, going through each individual file for all of our assets, is, as I mentioned, there is nothing that is preventing lasting protections for our open space reserves. So there's nothing odd or peculiar in any of the language of the either whether it was a donation or whether it was an outright purchase. There's nothing in there that says that you cannot put an overlay of protection across all of our open space reserves that would prevent any kind of development or sale or whatever this body chooses to do, and protect it for future generations. Nearly all of our park sites, all of our green grass park sites in the lower level, all also have no restrictions on them as well that would prohibit additional protections. In fact, we discovered that there are 35 different parks, and I will show those to you in a moment, that actually already have written protection in with deed restrictions or donation agreements that are already embedded in those park sites. So there's nothing more that could be done with them other than be a park in our system. We did find 5 interesting parks that we refer to as outliers that really isn't a challenge that's worded there. It's more of just further discussion. And we will talk about those here in a moment when we move forward. So here are the 35 that, and we won't go through each of these obviously, but you can just kind of look and see when I look at this, I just see the generosity, because a lot of these came through donations from our constituency in our city. And so I see a lot of citizens that had a very genuine interest in making sure that what they do for the city in providing an asset like a park, that it stays a park in perpetuity. And it starts at Ann Morrison and goes all the way to Winstead Park. Each of these has something in the file that says it will remain a park for generations. Most of them as well, and I would add here, Madam Mayor and council members, have remedies as well embedded. So not only does it say it has to be a park, but then it goes on to say if it's not, and then it has a remedy. And for most of those that were donations, it would refer back to it has a reversionary clause that would refer back to the seller or to the family that the donation occurred from.
Madam Mayor, before we move on, Doug, real quick, number 5, Bora Park, does that include the unimproved portion of Bora Park?
It does not include that. So that's not part of the original purchase there.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we'll, excuse me, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodies, we'll address that a little bit when we get to the undeveloped parks that we talked about a month ago.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Doug, because while this is the developed park pieces, we agreed to a calendar for development of that open parcel at Bora Park in the last meeting. There was a timeline on there. And
Yep.
So you'll be talking about that and others next or before this ends, correct?
Correct. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So so again, to look at all of our assets, one of the questions the mayor had, council members, was, could you also tell us what those protections are? In other words, what parks, and I listed the previous 35, do we have protections already under, or do we already protections overlaid on? And so you saw the 35, these are our open space protections. And if you look down through the 8 of these, we actually have 14 reserves, and you can see 6 of the 14 are actually listed here as fully protected and has language within either the purchase or any kind of donation we received in those reserves that would prohibit anything other than its intended use. And so that's a good thing. And the mayor just pointed out on our latest closing yesterday, we are starting to put language in the purchase sale agreement that says it will remain open space. And so it doesn't have a remedy per se attached to it that says if it doesn't in the future, in 20 years, what occurs. But our legal team has indicated that's enough. If we have that in the agreement, that is enough to be certain that it would be maintained for its intended use for generations to come. I would point out number 5 is military reserve. And I believe most council members know that actually is owned by the federal government, by the Department of Interior. And it can only be used for open space or for approved recreational purposes. And a good example is the bike park. We had to seek and get approval from the BLM in order to put the bike park in, which they provided because it's a recreational use. Anything outside of that would actually revert the military reserve back to the federal government, and it would become part of the Department of Interior. Believe it or not, that has happened in our history. Several decades ago, I believe there was some landfill issues that was occurring in military reserve, and the federal government took the reserve back, and we were able to fix the issue, and then we got military reserve back to us. So we never want to see that happen again. So we're very careful of what happens in military reserve. But of these, that is the only other one that we that we don't actually own as a city of Boise.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
And maybe you're going to get to this, Doug, but I don't see Hulls Gulch on there, and I seem to remember the papers did include preservation.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, I'm very glad you brought that up. I have looked at that file probably more than any other file we have, and it actually does not have language in there that says it has to be maintained as open space. It has some language in there on federal funding that was received. It doesn't say that federal funding has to be returned. It does say, though, that all the individual donations that came in for that would have to be returned if it ceased to be open space. But it didn't specifically have something in there that actually said that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I do wonder, I don't know, it's my memory that the land and water conservation funds, which are the federal funds that were used, do come with a stipulation that if the use changes, there is a process. So we might look at that.
Yes, and Madam Mayor, Council President Clay, there is, and we'll go back on a review that. We're not done with the reserves yet, Madam Mayor, Council Member Clegg, because of all the individual, we haven't gone through every single individual parcel, and we'll give some more attention to Hulls Gulch. That one was a little interesting in looking at the file on that. I would have assumed that would have had language that would have had some perpetuity intended use language in it. Any other questions? So the park outliers identified earlier, these are those. So Fairmont and Hillside Park are actually owned by the Boise School District. We have, in fact, we're in the process of renewing. Council will see coming to you in the very near future lease renewals for both of those. It's owned by the Boise School District. And then Eagle Rock Park and Veterans Memorial Park are actually owned by the state. So we will be having conversations with both the state and the school district about our process and what our plans are. We will need them to be able to participate with us if we are to include these 4 sites into our protection requirements. But again, we'll have those conversations with those 2 entities. Florence Park was the interesting one. And if you're not familiar with Florence Park, it's off of Fairview Avenue. And for our council members that are involved in Girl Scouts, it is right next door to the previous Silver Sage Girl Scout headquarters. And it's a small 2-acre park that was donated to us, I believe, in 1998. And in the donation agreement, it actually does state that the city can sell the park if it chose to do so. However, the proceeds would have to go towards the development of another park or the purchase of land that will become another city park. It also had language in there that if the Silver Sage Girl Scouts chose to expand their headquarters there, they could actually expand it into the park and actually take that 2 acres and have additional office space. I think since then, they have moved out by Maple Grove. And so I don't believe it would still be part of what Silver Sage would need. But just again, going through the files, that was an interesting tidbit that came from the donor of that park, that it could be sold or it could be developed into additional office space for Silver Sage Girl Scouts. So as Madam Mayor mentioned earlier, I was here a month ago to go through a quick overview of our undeveloped park spaces, which would be included in this protection, potential protection that the council could consider. And I'll just quickly run through these again for you. Syringa Park, which is in Southwest Boise. We have slated a construction timeline of 2028 for that park. The Pierce Park site, which is just below the newest Foothills property that we just closed on yesterday. It's at the very end of Pierce Park Lane. We have a 2024 construction timeline for that. Sioux Howell Park, which is out at the junction of Warren Springs and Idaho 21, just below the bridge. A construction timeline of 2030. Spalding Ranch, which we're moving forward and have been moving forward for the last 2 years there. The construction timeline in 2023, we have a number of things we're going to be doing out there, but this should actually say 2023 and on, because it will be something that will be continuing to work through probably the next 10 years. And then Alta Harris Park site, which is in the Harris Ranch in Southeast Boise, Barber Valley planning area, and has a construction timeline at this date is 2025. Gary Lane and the Fire and Park parcel in Northwest Boise, construction timeline to be determined, again, depending on whether this is a fire station or if there's another location in Northwest Boise. The Bora Park parcel, as Mayor McLean pointed out, is in 2026. McDevitt parcel in West Boise, we have about 7.5 to 8 acres of undeveloped property there. We're looking at 2026. Liberty Park parcel is to be determined. That is a life estate by the family that we purchased Liberty Park from. And so that would be determined when that life estate no longer exists. And then the Warm Springs parcel, we're looking at a 2024 timeline.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Quick question. Doug, the list of undeveloped sites, are you saying that none of those have any protections in place? In looking at that, for instance, the Spalding Ranch has the historic designation in place. I suspect the Alta Harris Park will not come to us without a preservation requirement in place.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, that is a great question. And you know what? I believe on the undeveloped park sites, I'm not sure what detail we went through in those files. So we will do that and get that back to you, because you're exactly right. There is a historical designation on Spalding Ranch, for example. So that would have some significant protections on that parcel as well. So we will go back through that. My apologies for that. We will get that done and get that back to council through a memo to let you know what we discovered on each of these.
And then the native plant preserve didn't appear on any of these lists. I believe it has a perpetual protection in place as well.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, which parcel?
The native plant preserve in just off Brumback, up on the edge of the hills.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, yes, the Houserath property. Yes, it does have protections on that from the donation from the Houseraths. We did not get it on here, but it does have a
So we could
protection
add
on
that
it. It
to the
does, and
list.
we will
Okay.
make sure that gets added on.
Thank you.
Nope, thank you. So moving forward, our next steps is we will have those discussions, as I mentioned, Madam Mayor and council members, with the state of Idaho and the Boise School District about their properties. Today would be great if there's any feedback, thoughts, any direction from city council on thoughts that you have moving forward on some potential protection options, what you would like to see. And also moving forward, when we acquire new properties, it would be under the assumption if we're protecting everything we have now, we would want obviously something in place that would also provide that same type level of protection for any new acquisitions we have. So any direction we could get from council today, we would take that and go back to our legal team, which has been working in the background on potential protection options to bring to council. I anticipate that will be wrapped up in the next several weeks and that there'd be an opportunity for our legal team to come back to council with those options for you to review. But we certainly would be open to any feedback we have on what we've discussed today, and that we can get that to our legal team and have them include that in any of the options that they would be bringing back to you.
Great, thanks, Doug. We'll take some comments, and as we grow and we've now seen a list of parks that need some work and a recognition that we value protecting them, it's important that we do hear the recommendations from you and the legal team in terms of the steps that we can take as a city to make real the commitment that we all have. I'm so interested to hear people's feedback. I do have one question that I thought of while you were listing, and doesn't need to be answered today, but when you come back, I'm also curious if funds are used to acquire access to canal pathways, to create canal pathways, a conversation too about what that means. I know some of it'll be leased, et cetera, but if there are ways, if with our investment for pieces that we can protect them as we would parks, we ought to know that. If we can't, we ought to know that too.
Madam Mayor. 2 comments, Doug. The first, well, apart from a big thank you for this. First, I think one thing that might be helpful as we think about all of these things going forward is a policy for the city on land acquisitions aimed towards parks, which might help set up both community expectations and landowner expectations as we come in. You're giving, selling, buying, trading, et cetera, this land. And so, we come to this with a spirit of long-term public access. I think that's what most people expect, but the written policy or something along those lines might help. And then the second thing is maybe not the policy, but certainly our practice here should recognize, I think the public certainly expects that our parks are going to be our parks forever. That's what we all understand, but we should also recognize a little bit of humility with respect to future city councils, city leaders, city needs. And I think whatever, at a high level, whatever rule we craft or whatever restrictions we put in place probably shouldn't be blanket identical for every parcel. And they shouldn't unduly, we should just recognize that the needs of Boise in 200 years might really conflict with maintaining, one particular acre open. I'm not sure it's legally possible actually to have that kind of dead hand control, but my view at a high level would be whatever we do should make it very, very difficult to unwind an open space type protection. But we shouldn't set the expectation or have a desire to make it so ironclad that it cannot ever possibly be done.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. I think Councilmember Bajent brings up a good point because, who knows what does happen in a very long future. On the other hand, I do believe pretty strongly that people, especially Boiseans, value their parks very highly. And once a park site is developed, they expect it to remain a park. And so I think we've got our developed parks as one, and then the undeveloped parcels or the future purchases as another that might possibly have some different policies on them. And I would say that because, and even maybe the developed sites, but probably not. For instance, you brought up the Florence Park, which could be sold, but only if another park site were acquired. We actually have a resolution on our agenda at noon today doing just that with the park site in Syringa Valley. And I think it's a good and meaningful action for us to take because it's a park site that will better serve the residents now that we know what the development is going to look like there than the site that was originally deeded to us. And so I think whatever we do, we should be mindful that there may be times when a particular site does not, cannot, whatever, doesn't as well fill the need as another site might, and that the possibility of making those kinds of trades should be out there, especially for undeveloped sites. The other thing that struck me is understanding what intended use is. We have for many years talked about co-locating other city services at certain park sites, fire stations, police substations, maybe even in the future, you'd think of a branch library. I don't know for sure what those might be, but again, I would not want to foreclose the opportunity to do something that would actually provide better, more efficient, more serendipitous service to our residents, because we've so tightly tied down what we can do with that site, that is a use that wouldn't be allowed even though it serves the public. So for me, it would be whatever these protections are, keep the public in mind, serve the public, be able to trade if there's a good reason and a betterment by doing that, and making sure that whatever it is we do it very intentionally, very transparently, and that everybody, as Councilmember Bajan said, understands what the policy is, so that as we move forward and either acquire or develop sites, everyone knows what the expectations are.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clay, great feedback. And I agree, it's not a one size fits all. So I appreciate Mayor McLean pushing this ahead to say, let's start looking at this now. And I think it's still going to be there's going to be some time that we're going to need to go through, and we have a lot of assets. And if it's not a one size fit all, I think we really want to look at how that is going to play out across what would be 117 potential different sites that we have in our system. So I think that's a great comment. I would point out on the undeveloped sites, Councilmember Clegg, you did bring up the Spalding Ranch and the protection there. We will go back through these, and I will let you know if there's additional protections on these. But for example, Sioux Howell and Alta Harris both do have that on them. And Liberty also does as well. And so we did have those included in our full range of menu of park sites, but we'll go through the others and make sure that we're not missing something with any of those as well.
Madam Mayor. Doug, thank you so much for this. I've been hearing a lot from folks around Bora Park about the redevelopment of that parcel. So it's been really nice to have some clarity from your last presentation on what the master planning and capital improvement schedule looks like on that. So I appreciate it. I have a question around, we've talked a lot about laydown yards and maintenance sites that exist in the parks, particularly Julia Davis, and how those might actually have a higher use for our city. I'm wondering if there's been any conversation about that and what that might look like as far as having this conversation about preserving park sites in perpetuity, and maybe how those more facility type uses might be treated differently.
Yep, Madam Mayor, Council Member Woodings, that is still ongoing with the maintenance location at Julia Davis Park. And I want to make sure I always point out, it is not part of the park.
Okay.
So it is actually, it is a completely separate parcel that the city purchased. So it's not part of what the donation agreement that came from the Davis family. That continues to move forward. Our facilities team within the city is continuing to look for where we need to have a place to go first, because it's quite a large commitment to move we have two different divisions, maintenance divisions, that work out of that location. So it's finding a suitable location for that, and then freeing that up for development. We've looked through our entire inventory to see if we have other locations that would apply to that same type of concept. And we really don't have any right now. We've actually had to create a couple of spots within parks. For example, Ann Morrison at the northwest corner beyond Together Treasure Valley Dog Island, we've created a maintenance area there to help accommodate some of the overflow that we have for our downtown parks. So we don't have anything else, but Julia Davis, Councilmember Woodings, is a good example of a higher and best use probably for that than a maintenance yard.
Thank you. That answered my question completely.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Doug. I think it's wonderful that we're doing this work, especially because it honors the people who have been generous enough to give, to create these spaces for our community members. I'm wondering if, as part of the record, I think it's fascinating how Council President Clegg remembers certain things, and then as you look in the papers, you're maybe not finding it there, or it's, I would like for us to highlight that part of the reason that we want to protect these pieces of land as open space and parks is for equity. I mean, we talk about diversity and inclusion, but sometimes we skip over the equity part. And as we create more dense housing opportunities in our city to fit more people and have more multifamily options, it's probably going to be less children having a backyard to play in. And the reality is the city of Boise is that backyard. And I would just like for us to, if we can put some language in there referencing equity, that's a big part of why we want to protect these open spaces and these parks, is for those folks who will not have that opportunity to enjoy their own space. And they need to make use of all these wonderful spaces that the city is providing for them.
Madam Mayor, Council Pro Tem Sanchez, I appreciate you bringing that up. And we do, and I think you're aware of this, we have our eye on all of social equity, and we're looking at different neighborhoods and where we can, and Councilmember Clay can jump in. She's always looking for small pieces anywhere in our more underserved areas and how we can just buy a small plot of land and create that neighborhood component in areas of higher need. And so our eye is on that. We continue to look for opportunities that we could bring back to council for your consideration.
Madam Mayor, just real quick, Council President Clegg summed up most of my thoughts very, very well. I think mostly what our community members are looking for is a predictable development pattern, right? And that predictability really comes to me in a couple of different ways. One, it's the things that exist now that you think are never going to change, and that you imagine the future. And that's part of predictability, but also predictability is understanding what the process would be for something that is less defined to change as well, and what that process would look like. And so certainly when we have either undeveloped park sites or future properties, knowing the flexibility that exists or the options that may be on the table, and for the community to know what those options may be, and then also their opportunity to weigh in, I think is such an important part of that predictability, as well as knowing the things that are existing now will continue to exist. So thank you, Doug.
Madam Mayor, I'm wondering if a motion is in order so staff has some clear direction. And with that, I would move that we direct staff to return to the mayor and council with options for how to protect parks based on the discussion that was had today and the research that you've done.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. There you have it. Thanks,
Thank you, Madam
everybody.
Mayor, council members.
Important and good conversation. And next up for the remaining last half hour, we've got a hard stop at 11:30 so that some additional things can be done before noon. Courtney's here to update everyone on a couple strategic priorities, and then also to give everyone a chance to provide feedback on the things that you were working on or hope to work on in the coming year. And there are some big things like ARPA that we're waiting for. All of you have been invited to various listening sessions to kick that off. There's some other topics that Courtney has to just run through and update everybody on, but thought it was a good time to do that before lunch.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I stand before you today just to give you some quick updates, and then I'm open to hearing if there are any other topics at future work sessions you'd like to explore. On ARPA, as the mayor indicated, we're in the process of collecting internal and external ideas for the funding. The mayor and council will be involved in listening sessions with community leaders to get that high-level input. In addition, our online survey open to our residents has been open and is expected to be open until December. And then another aspect of the ARPA funding is trying to navigate with our state and other local entities in terms of where they're putting their resources. As you can imagine, the city wants to take as much advantage of as much of this funding as it can. So we're conducting meetings and discussions with our partners at the state and local level, and also in the nonprofit spaces to get a better understanding of where everyone is thinking they may be using their own allocation of ARPA funding to best support the community. And then we're also investigating where we can get stacked benefits. For example, we don't want to do a single broadband project that had an opportunity to take care of some other community needs at the same time in the same location. We anticipate, because of the delay on the federal side, that these monies will not be distributed until March. So I just wanted you all to know there's plenty of time here for community conversations and feedback. We are bringing on some expertise in this space, and I expect you will get an update on the approach those folks are taking once we bring them on. I think that timeline is December. So with that, I'll stand for any questions on ARPA.
Madam Mayor. Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate that. I would think that once we have that expert in place, getting a work session presentation on what we anticipate that ARPA funds will be able to be used for, so that the community has a little bit more clarity around that. I know that I've been following the conversation pretty closely and I don't have much clarity. So I think it would be really helpful.
Thank you for that. Madam Mayor, it would also be helpful if we at that point have more clarity from the federal government.
Madam Mayor, just quick on the ARPA, no feedback, just a compliment. It's pretty clear that we're doing a much better job at the city than certain other agencies in the state. Well, the state has been, frankly, and a lot of that is exactly this kind of work. And I think it's mostly you. So thank you. It really matters. It's important to our community. It's a lot of money and it's going to do a lot of good. So thank you.
Madam Mayor. Also, directly about the ARPA funds, I'm glad to hear that we're working and talking and having lots of conversations with the nonprofit sector. I think when it comes to working with and identifying a lot of our marginalized communities and ones who maybe were not able to take advantage of some of the support that was offered earlier, is just so important, and they're probably our best connections to a lot of those communities. The second part, and I've mentioned this before, and I just want to continue to make sure that I've got this on the record, is that if there is support for small businesses, I know there are so many businesses who applied for first rounds of funding earlier through the CARES Act who were not able to get funding either because they weren't able to get high enough on the list, or there were smaller clerical errors that disqualified from that. And I just want to make sure that we make it a priority to take care of some of our businesses who potentially missed out during an opportunity for crucial funding, who may need that help more than ever.
Thanks for that.
Madam Mayor. Well, thank you, Courtney. I'm looking forward to the listening sessions. I'll have to miss one of those, unfortunately, but we'll be at the others. I also wonder, as we partner with our other local agencies and nonprofits, if there might be a role for certain council members with certain ones if they have a relationship. So just keep that in mind. I think there's sometimes those personal relationships can make all the difference in figuring out if there is a partnership there. And knowing this council, I'm pretty confident that they'd be willing to participate in the places where they'd be helpful and needed. So we'll look to you for guidance on that. The last question I have, and I haven't heard the last outcome of this. I know that the federal, that Treasury is going to rescind and redistribute some of the ERA round one funds, but I wasn't clear on some of the CARES funds, if that was also going to happen. And if it is, I wonder, given that this process won't be available until March, if that would be a place we would look to bring in those small businesses that qualified, but we ran out of money for that first time.
Madam Mayor, Council President, I don't know the answer to your question. I do know Boise is well positioned to receive reallocated funds because we have been spending money at a much higher rate than similar cities or anyone in Idaho, frankly. So I'll loop back to you in regards to those funds. I just don't know the answer right now.
And I'll jump in here too. We've received no indication that they would be reallocated to us. However, given the track record we have in investing them wisely and quickly to the beneficial use of the community, we are prepared to request, apply for, take any steps necessary to ensure that Boiseans are able to benefit from those resources that are available.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, I think we were all horrified to read in the news that our state could possibly turn back millions of dollars that Idahoans need. And I'm just very proud of us, of our city, of our leaders who have made sure that our people have access to that much needed resource. And so that's all I wanted to say is thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I don't know if we're supposed to go into priorities now, but I was going to make a suggestion on that. And if we weren't, I can hold it. Did
Yeah,
you
but
have
there are
more?
a couple more things. That you
Okay,
wanted to update
great,
us
great.
Madam Mayor, you can proceed if you want.
on. Oh, okay.
I was just going to suggest that, given that I don't know that most of us have had an opportunity to think about that, that we put that off and actually have a more of a roundtable discussion or about that rather than a dais one, if that's a possibility at some point at maybe our December strategic planning meeting. It would also give us an opportunity to think, I guess, more clearly about what's left after the upcoming election in terms of the bond and everything.
Sure. I think I would propose that we continue. If there are folks that have anything to say, it would be helpful to staff to hear it now rather than in December. And then we can have December, January, a longer follow-up conversation on that or whatever more needs to come out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Go ahead. Courtney.
Did you want some more updates? Is
Yeah.
that okay? Madam Mayor, members of the council, just because these aren't necessarily strategic initiatives, but our department directors play critical roles in the city. I just wanted to give you an update that we are in the process of recruiting a new planning and development services director. We expect that to be completed in December. And also, if you're not aware, Terry Schwarzman is retiring from the city. And we are working with her to recruit the next director of arts and history. And the only other update I wanted to mention today is the city staff in the climate division have completed the Clean Cities Index, and we're working on what the implementation of that information would look like to bring it forward to you probably in late November, early December. As a reminder, that's the information we collected to get a better understanding of our more vulnerable neighborhoods in terms of health impacts, heat impacts, in regards to the tree canopy initiative, where we're lacking in the community. And it really has produced some really interesting information, but we feel it's important to bring it to you with a plan to address the challenges that came through with that data. And with that, those are the updates I had.
Madam Mayor, Courtney, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I think that'll be really interesting data. The other day, I was looking back through our neighborhood almanacs, which were something that we had for a while and were presented as part of our packets when we were looking at development. They were, do you remember what those were? The little the little kind of one pagers on, how much of a neighborhood was rentals versus ownership, the general demographics. It would be really cool to further enhance those with some of this data on climate in really specific neighborhoods. I just ran across them and I was like, oh, we haven't seen those for a while. But I meant to bring it up to Cody that I found them really interesting and enlightening. So might be a great time to refresh them.
Madam Mayor, council member, I appreciate that. I've never heard of these, so I will go looking for them.
Madam Mayor, just one note on the Clean Cities Index. I've been told by the folks who are working on the City of Trees Challenge that it's actually data that's probably better and more and deeper than any city that they've been working with across the country on tree planting. And so I think there's a real opportunity to use it, especially the American Forest Foundation has recently adopted a tree equity program in urban areas across the country. And I think we have an opportunity to provide leadership in how to measure that and how to work on it. And so I'm really excited about the Clean Cities Index. I know there's still lots more work to be done on it, but kudos to everyone who's worked on it so far. And the deep information that it's giving us that many other cities don't have access to.
Right.
Madam Mayor.
You aren't leaving, are you?
Madam Mayor, that is the end of my comments.
Okay. The next piece that we did want to just tee up was an opportunity for anyone that has anything right now to share priorities upcoming, so that in advance of our next larger session, staff is prepared, can integrate that into the work that's being done or the planning that's being done. And of course, support those of you that are working on particular things that might not have elevated to our attention yet. So with that, I'm going to ask Courtney to keep track so that we can follow up as needed, but just want to open it up for the next 15 minutes or so.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I can kind of kick things off and see if I can't provide some context to the discussion. And I think it was probably January or February of 2020. It was definitely before the pandemic because we were all here. There was an opportunity to kind of hear about some of the mayor's initiatives, as well as some of our interest in helping out in particular areas of those initiatives and priorities that we had as individual city council members. That was extremely helpful for me. Not just to understand the city's initiatives, which, I think that we're more aware of now, but the other council members, because it was really nice for me to know exactly what council member Bajent was interested in working on. And so if there was something that I was doing where there was an intersection overlap, that maybe there was an opportunity to work together there, or if somebody was doing something that was exactly the same, then there was probably ability to have some sort of discussion to make sure that we were working together towards those same efforts. At that time, I think that my three things were the canal pathways, learning as much as I can from all of you and from all of our staff, and then also being a really, really good team member. One of the things that I recognize is that we have at least one new council member who's going to be here next year. And there's probably some opportunity to make sure that the conversation that we had in 2020, where we clearly understood what other folks were doing, is something that we make a schedule and a habit of going forward. Also knowing that the last year and a half was really, really tricky in having those discussions and those priorities. So I guess just to follow up and let folks know what I'm working on. The Canal Pathways effort, or the Pathways program, is something I think we expect to see a master plan proposal before the end of the year or early next year. That certainly will be something that I'll be continuing to work on, especially hearing Sean's presentation about quality of life, the incredible things that the city's doing with the climate action roadmap. I think that there's still some great overlaps there. And even with the parks that we were talking about earlier, this is something that I'm going to continue to work on. And then the other thing that I would just add is that I'm a liaison to our Neighbors United Committee, which some of you may or may not know exactly what that is, but it's a collective impact group for our refugee community and the organizations that serve refugees and new Americans. And going forward with ARPA funds, with recoveries, with workforce development, with all these other things that we're working on, I want to make sure that we really are doing everything that we can to be a welcoming community for our both existing refugee and new American community, as well as the incoming refugees that we'll start seeing. We're already starting to see at this point. So I want to make sure that other council members know that that's on my radar, and the city knows that that's something that I have interest in helping out in any way that I can. And then finally, our climate action roadmap, I really think is one of the most exciting things that I've seen come out in the last several years. And it is so related to everything. And I think continuing on my desire to be a good team player with all of you, with all of our staff, and really with the rest of the community, is doing whatever we can to make sure that that is a community-wide team effort. That if there's other organizations, other businesses, individuals in our community, neighborhood associations who can get directly involved in adding to and buying in and being part of that climate action roadmap, that I'm being supportive of those efforts and bringing those people to the table. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me this opportunity. And like I said, I think that this is something that would be great to have on the schedule. So when we would know when this would happen, that was strategic in helping us decide what our council member funds were going to be used for, or new council members who may be coming in, and all these other things. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you, Courtney, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for kind of giving us this opportunity to provide some input. I can't say that I have any fully baked ideas because I hadn't been thinking about it prior to 10 minutes ago, but I'll give you what I have so far. One of the things I've been really interested in, and I know that our IT department has been working on an inventory, is broadband. I've talked to Sean about it a few times kind of throughout the year, but I mean, I know it's going to be a huge investment, and I know that we're going to need some leadership on what that investment looks like. So as much as I can be helpful and not a hindrance or a pest to the people who are doing the work on it, I would love to do that. I recognize it as one of the biggest equity issues in our city. And I'm really looking forward to using some of our funding to increase broadband equity throughout Boise. I think we've really felt the implications of that over the past year in our community. So that's kind of number one. And then number two is really, once our census data is in and we have kind of that census tract data, looking a little bit more holistically at where our gaps are and where equity doesn't exist in Boise, you know, like some of the climate impact stuff. I think broadband's a big piece of that. I think that just environmental health is probably a big piece of that, transportation, and just making sure that when we're investing in a way that's equitable to all of our citizens, not just in one area of the city or another. So that's, I think, more big picture strategically where I'm really interested as we keep going down this road of infrastructure investments and ARPA funding investments. So those are kind of my two initial thoughts. I'm always interested in having conversations about how we help families, especially working families with after school opportunities for their kids, and how we might expand that out as part of ARPA funding. And I don't ever want to be a hindrance or viewed as a pest, but I just want to be helpful in any way that I can.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've brought this up at several meetings, so I guess there's time to do policy about it. And it would be how we treat folks who are currently living in housing that they can afford. And as our community evolves and we bring in new developments, putting a policy in place that respects their humanity as we evolve. What that looks like, I don't know, but I know there's a lot of brilliant minds who can help me figure that out. But it's something that we need to be addressing. We just had cries for help from the folks at Reidenbaugh Place about not being treated with respect and dignity, even though that was agreed to by the developers. And I think we need to have firmer policy in place where we can make sure that folks in that process, I think it would be putting blinders on to act like our city is not going to change and evolve. But as we do that, can we treat people with dignity and respect as we do that? And shocker, still going to be working on DEI in every aspect of our work at the city. I'm really grateful that we are embracing the opportunity to be the model for the rest of the city in creating an environment where we can attract talent from diverse backgrounds to work for the city of Boise. And the next goal is that we create an environment where we retain them and they can bring forward the best of their work to the benefit of our entire community. So I think those are it for now.
Thank you. Well, not surprisingly, I'm continuing to be interested in forwarding the City of Trees Challenge. The folks that have been working on it have been having conversations for how to grow it beyond what it is now, and especially how to work with other cities who are interested in it. So part of that's internal to the city, part of that will be external. I'm really interested, to be honest with you, in working with the new person now that we're going to have on neighborhoods and figuring out what that means going forward. I think we've had kind of a eclectic mix of policies and people working with neighborhoods, and never really had a clear strategy about what we were trying to accomplish with it. So I think there's a real opportunity now, and especially potentially with a focus on ensuring that all neighborhoods have access to the things that they need, and not just some. I'm going to continue to work on rail issues. Those will be primarily focused regionally and or even nationally, but to the extent that I can, well, I will always will, but to the extent that it's needed, I'll make sure that everyone here gets involved in any decisions that involve the city of Boise. The city obviously owns 18 miles of the rail that will connect back to the main line. If there does end up being passenger rail, that 18 miles will end up being in play and in use. And so there will be some decisions around that that will need to be made. Councilmember Halliburton has been helping lead a task force on safe streets, Vision Zero. And that task force, I will be bringing something forward in the next bit. We'll necessarily have to partner with all of our other local partners to get much done. So that will be a bigger effort, but it'll include a lot of things that the city has to do. And then finally, as an AIC representative, our last meeting, we went over a potential legislative agenda. It occurs to me that it would be really useful to get an update from Kathy and potentially from AIC about the various legislative issues that are coming forward, and let us have a discussion and see if there's any particular items that we want to strongly get behind, or if we can come up with an agenda that we at least agree on and can quietly move forward with. I would guess that would be probably a separate meeting if we do it from the rest of the strategic planning. But regardless, I will make sure that all of you get the AIC material.
Madam Mayor, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity to provide this feedback or insight, I suppose. I'm sorry these are kind of scattered, and I'm looking forward to more of an opportunity to talk about this when I've had a little more time to prepare. But the kind of grab bag that I've jotted down here, First, I have some internal feedback and suggestions for our own inside the council workflow and ways to improve the way we do business. And then secondly, the way we do business with the mayor's office. I think I have some good ideas there and I'm looking forward to working on them. That's not strategic. That's just tactical, I suppose. I am really looking forward to doing everything I can to help the mayor integrate our climate work with economic development. I think that's long-term very important to Boise, and it's an opportunity to really have a permanent impact in our community in a positive way. And likewise, I'm looking forward to doing everything I can to help the new zoning code move forward and come to completion. It's just become so obvious to me in the last year that inefficiencies and difficulties there are, in certain narrow cases, really strangling our housing supply, which affects everyone. And in other cases, incongruities between the zoning code and Blueprint Boise and other places are it's really setting the public up for the wrong expectations, which causes disappointment and frustration in our community, which then makes it harder to get anything else done. So I think that's obviously a very front and center issue we're facing, but I think it's got long tendrils into many of the challenges we have in this community, and I really want to be as helpful as I can. In that vein, anything that I can do to help lighten and streamline the PDS workflow, the new director will surely help with that a lot, but that's pretty top of mind for me because it's such an important part of our city. Hopefully not into the next year, hopefully over the winter, you're going to see some things from me on really trying to nail down and fix some of the floater issues with parking in Barber Park. I know staff is already working and helping with that, but that was an ongoing issue last year that I was not in my top 3, but it was one that I was very involved in. And we're hoping to close that one up. I continue to have concerns and want to work on my sense, non-data driven sense, that as the nature of our economy changes and the relative wealth of a certain percentage of people in Boise changes and expands, that people are being left behind, and that has impacts for public safety and impacts, long impacts in terms of public safety, crime, quality of life issues that we all take for granted here now because they're so good. I have a lot of other notes here. Those are the top kind of biggest things on my mind right now, but I'm really looking forward to another conversation in the strategic planning context.
All right, well, thank you. We will get one of those scheduled, I think probably beginning of year. This and more we can go deeper into. Really appreciate the feedback.
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, one more that I do want to highlight because it's
Yeah.
not on our radar and I think it's important. We should all be watching as we get through these elections in the first half year with districts, half districts, and we should be thinking about things both culturally and procedurally that we may need to change on the council as the nature of representation in our community changes. No longer is everyone elected at large representing the city at large. And I think some of the way we do business assumes that. And we may need to make some changes. And we should be watching through these elections and as we enter this kind of half district council for opportunities to do that.
All right, thank you all very much. We're going to recess till noon. We'll come back then. See you all soon.